people to get in here since this is a smaller channel, and then we will start our audio review. Okay, there it is. Now, once again, we'll wait for a few minutes. Now, a good creator named Vox in the Void has some original content, and this story that he's created, I think, is A+. It is excellent, so we're going to listen to it. Now, he's making this story on continuous parts, so this should be real now and then. It's currently up to 4 parts. I've listened to almost the first 2 parts, and I intentionally didn't listen to the rest because I wanted to do this with this story. Hello, Ronnie. So we're going to wait for a few people to get here. Now, the kitty on the thumbnail, it's Loki. Him don't come out much. As you can see, Loki's fixed. And Loki got big tail. Now, Loki and I, we have the same birthday. The rest of his litter was born the day before my birthday. But Loki was born after midnight, so Loki and I share the same birthday. Hello, Take Today. Well, I'm good. We're about to have some audio entertainment, and it'll be something different. And this is Loki. And Loki rarely ever comes up and gets in my lap or nothing, but he has. And as you can see, Richella is nowhere to be seen, because Richella and Summer don't like him. And as you can see, look how big he is. I mean, you're used to seeing little Summer and little Richella. This is Loki. Loki is huge. Aren't you, Loki? Says, yes, I am. And him not too bright either. Says, yes, I'm not too smart. And he loves his brothers. And that's all he wants to do with his life, is to hang out with his brothers. But tonight, he's decided to hang out with us. Hello, Let It Go. Well, I'm going to go ahead and start the audio in just a moment. Now, this story is called Gav and Bob. And it's in multiple parts. And I'm not sure how many parts we're going to do tonight. I'll kind of wing it and we'll see. Now, I tested this audio live, and they were nice and didn't strike me. So this one, part 1 is only 21 minutes. Now, part 2 is about 37 minutes. So depending on how the commentary goes, we will either play just part 1 or we will play part 1 and 2. But currently there are 4 parts to this. And one of the reasons why I decided to play this one, it actually has some tearjerker moments. Now, the setting of this is Warhammer 40K. And they're about to make a big Amazon series based on it. So one of the things that I'm going to do is give you audio commentary explaining this. So when all of this become mainstream, you will be the person that can say, well, this is that, and everyone else will be impressed. And as you can see, my Loki loves me. And now we will start our part 1 of Gav and Bob.
Gav Smith was part of the Imperial Guard. He was a guardsman, and this made Gav very happy. Gav liked being a guardsman, because then he could do the will of the immortal God Emperor, and that was one of Gav's most favourite things to do in the whole world. Today it was Gav's turn to fetch the huge sack of potatoes from the food wagon, and to peel them. Gav liked to do this, because he also liked eating potato peel. The Commissar said Gav was a good Ogrin, because Gav did all the things that he was told to do. This made Gav...
Now, an Ogrin. Now, in the Warhammer 40K universe, there are planets a lot bigger than Earth. Well, humans that lived on these planets, they developed gigantic, like ogres. But they also became not so smart. So, Bob and Gav, they both kind of have a lower intelligence, like some of the people that we run across on the internet. And even though they're functional people, they're not the sharpest knives in the drawer.
Are very happy. The Commissar was not like other Commissars, because he did not shout and shoot people for being scared of things like small spaces and the dark. This was good, because Gav did not like small spaces, and Gav was scared of the dark, because that was when nightmares came to get you. The Commissar was Gav's friend. The Commissar was not an ogre like Gav, and was really smart, and could read and write, and Gav could not do that, because it was too hard. Not even the Sarge could read long words, but the Commissar
So yes, much like Velma, they could not read and write.
said that that was okay. He was better at killing orcs than he was. This made Gav very happy, because Gav liked to be useful.
Do you want to help peel the potatoes, Bob?
Bob was one of Gav's friends. They had come from the same tribe on the planet Barakak. Gav missed his tribe. When the war against the orcs was over, he would be able to go back home. Or if more than 10 years was over. It had been nearly 2 years, and they had nearly won. The Commissar said this was because Gav and his friends were such good fighters, and they were making the Emperor happy by killing nasty orcs. The Commissar's name was Larrykin von Kelverstein, but he said that Gav and his friends could call him Ari if they wanted to, because they were all friends.
Now, commissars are a political officer that can shoot you for about any reason. Now, because they're Ogryn, they've apparently got a very empathetic commissar to run them and to usher them along through battlefields.
Yes, please.
Said Bob. Bob liked eating potato peel too. For breakfast it was mashed potato and mushy peas. Gav did not like mushy peas. Peas should come in a pod, and they should not be mushy. Gav had used to grow peas for his tribe. Gav missed his tribe. But he also had such wonderful friends here as well. It was good to have friends. Especially when you had to kill orcs. Gav killed orcs with a big las cannon. The Commissar said it was a gift from the Emperor, so Gav kept it clean and shiny, and made sure that he did not put it down somewhere and forget where. But sometimes he did. But then the Commissar would come and tell him where he had lost it, and then he would tell Gav not to do it again. But Gav always did, even though he never meant to. This made Gav sorry. Bob killed orcs with a las cannon as well, but Bob did not lose his so much. Gav sometimes wished he was as good at not losing things as Bob was. The Commissar did not have a big shiny gun like Gav. All Larry had was a small long las rifle.
Now, I did almost tag Blind Bob in this. But I thought, let's not bring drama over here, but there is one part of me that 5 or 6 times was very tempted to tag Bob and Lori in this. Just saying.
But that was okay, because the Ari was very small. Commissar Ari was very clever, because he had been everywhere and done everything. Once, he had stood on a landmine, and one of his legs was made of metal, and it went clonk when he kicked a stone. Gav was happy that his foot is not made of metal, because it sounds cold. Bob liked having potato peeling contests with Gav. Gav kept on losing, but Gav did not mind, because he was peeling potatoes for the Emperor. Gav loved fighting. He wished he was better at it. Whenever he sparred with Bob, he always ended up knocked out, but he didn't mind. He knew that Bob was helping him get better, and the better he got, the better Gav could serve the immortal Emperor.
Now, if only some of the people that I covered on YouTube had that same philosophy, that they would be happy when I knock them out because I'm making them better.
Gav hated the small he had to ride in. Every time he was called to serve the Emperor, he had to ride in that scary, dark place. But it was all right, because Bob was there, and he'd lead all the other Ogrin in a rousing chorus of "The Emperor is the best." They only knew the chorus anyway, but it helped the dark, tight place seem less scary. The flashing lights always made Gav happy. That meant he was going to serve his Emperor. That meant the door would open, and he'd be able to shoot his gun. Gav loved his gun. He loved it when he fired it, and the enemy died. He'd hold down the trigger and shout at the enemy, making them die in the name of his Emperor, his best friend Bob, right beside him. He liked Bob. Bob was his best friend. Gav had fought all kinds of enemies of the Emperor. His favourite were the Greenskins, because they seemed to like fighting as much as Gav did. He knew to go for the big ones, the one who was hitting all the others. It was a race to see who would kill the big one first.
For the orc, whoever's the biggest is in charge.
Bob usually won. If you killed the big one, the regular orcs would be easier to beat. The bugs scared Gav. They made him sick to his stomach, especially when he slammed the butt of his gun against their head, and they blew up all over him. They smelled bad, and tasted bad. You couldn't cook bugs. Not even the stumpies could make them taste good. The pants stealers were the worst. Gav always made sure his belt was extra tight when he fought pants stealers. The humans who turned against the Emperor always made Gav extra angry. Why would they stop loving the Emperor? What did the Emperor do to them, except love them and protect them? Gav always loved killing bad humans. It made him feel good. Commissar Ari said that was good. Being angry against traitors was good. That made Gav happy. When Ari first told Gav that, he'd hugged Ari so hard, he'd had to stay in the Medicaid hotel for a week. The food was really good when Gav visited.
Now, usually for entering the commissar, you would be executed. But, of course, since they were Ogrin and he was trying to hug the commissar, they were very nice to Gav and did not execute him. Now, once again, being a commissar, they're normally the tough guys, but apparently their commissar, they found the friendliest one in the universe to protect the Ogrin.
Gav had only faced the metalheads once, but he knew that he never wanted to do it again. No matter how hard you hit them, they just get back up again. It wasn't fair. Every other enemy was kind enough to die when you showed them how bad they were. The metalheads were cheaters, coming back to life like that. Bob said that Ari said that his Professor Kane at the big school was scared of the metalheads. Gav didn't believe him. Commissars aren't scared of anything, and Kane is some kind of super commissar. He must melt metalheads with his eyes or something.
Now, the character that he's mentioning is Commissar Caiaphas Kane, and he is a legendary figure in Warhammer 40k. In his books, I believe, are some of the best in the entire Warhammer 40k universe. Now, Commissar Kane is supposed to be a hero of the Imperium. Now, his main goal is not to get killed, and he tries to put as many people in the path of danger as possible, and him as far away from it. But unfortunately, his reputation and commanders keep putting him in situations that would get him killed. And that's a character we will talk about in other stories at another time.
Gav hated the Eldar. They were like shiny bugs. You'd almost get your hands on them and they'd slip through your fingers. Their little arrows hurt, too. Bob was better at fighting Eldar than Gav. He'd back them into a corner and crush their mushy bodies with his bare hands.
They break easy once you corner them,
Bob would say, shiny blood covering his uniform. That made Gav smile. He missed Bob. Bob always made him smile. Gav was there the day that Ari died. Gav and Bob and all their friends had gone for a walk. They were walking through a forest. Gav liked the forest because it smelled like home. Harry was walking at the back of them. He always did this to make sure none of them got lost. Gav once got lost. It had made him scared. Harry never got lost. He was really smart like that. But then an orc, all dressed like a tree, shot him. Gav did not see it happen. He could not stop it. The sound of Harry dying had warned them all. They had killed the nasty orcs with the big guns the Emperor had given them. But Harry was dead. They took him back to the camp to see if the flesh fixer could fix him. He tried, but Harry had already gone to the Emperor. This made the whole tribe sad. Everyone in the tribe liked Harry. Harry was smart. They dug a hole for Harry to sleep in. Bob was the priest of the tribe, so Bob said the death words over the place where Harry slept. The whole tribe wept. They did not weep for Harry, because Harry was with the Emperor. They wept for themselves, because they had been left behind. Losing Harry was bad, but...
Now, in this universe, they worship the Emperor as a god, so they actually believe that when you died, you went to the Emperor.
Losing Bob made Gav sadder than ever. Bob was the reason Gav hated demons as much as he did. He'd fought them before, and he'd found them to be so confusing. Some of them were easy, charging or shambling forward with big swords or small daggers. They broke easy. The skinny ones were like Eldar, but they made Gav feel weird. Looking at them was like looking at a girl Ogrin after Gav had learned what they were for. But they broke easier than the Redskin or rotting demons, once you could stop them from dancing. The last demons were the kind that took Bob. He hated them most of all. He hated their laughing at him. They'd surprised them after Bob and Gav had been leading their new commissar. Gav could never remember his name, into a church to the Emperor. Gav had a headache the whole time. They'd made the place bad. They'd broken statues of the Emperor and carved a weird flame all over the church. That's when the demons had attacked. They'd burned the commissar before any of Gav's groups could react. They looked like water that had grown faces. Looking at those faces made Gav's nose bleed. Gav would never forget those faces. Bob rushed into the thick of things, like he always did. Bob was always that way, charging forward for the Emperor, killing his enemies. Bob was good at that. He was a good friend. The water demons were fast, really fast. They jumped back and burned Bob to a crisp. But Bob didn't die like the commissar. Gav sometimes felt bad that he couldn't remember the commissar's name. He hoped someone remembered the commissar's name. Bob caught one of the water demons with his hands and ripped it apart. It was pink before, and it had been happy, laughing. Now the two pieces were blue, and they weren't happy anymore. They attacked Bob and bit at him. The other tribe had started killing the other water demons, but they were too late. Bob's last words always made Gav sad.
I'm going to miss the potato skins.
Gav beat the blue water demons until he was slamming his hands into the floor of the church. He kept it up.
And those were Bob's last words. That he's going to miss peeling the potato skins. Like I mentioned, the Ogrins have the mind of a child, and they're put on a futuristic battlefield.
Until he realized his hands were bleeding. He kept doing it until he realized he was crying.
No.
He kept crying until the general had found them. Gav still misses Bob. Bob was a good friend. Gav had never wanted to kill one of his friends. The general was a friend, but he wanted to kill the general once. He wanted to kill the general when he said that Bob needed to be burned. The tribe had their ways. Bob needed to be honored and buried, like all good friends. But the general said that Bob's body was sick. that if they didn't burn it, those water demons could come back. They burned Bob's body right there in that church. But not before Gav got his tribe together and gave him a short, proper funeral. Gav was Bob's best friend. His other tribesmen let him give the last words.
Bob was a good friend. He liked to fight. He liked potato skins. He was a good soldier for the Emperor. Now he's with the Emperor.
Then one of the general's friends burned Bob's body right there in the Emperor's church. Now whenever Gav peels potatoes, he thinks of Bob. It doesn't hurt as bad anymore. Now he smiles and remembers how good a friend Bob was. Bob always made Gav smile. Even when he was dead, he could make Gav smile. Gav couldn't eat another potato skin. It didn't taste good anymore. Gav remembered the day he found the bad man who brought the water demons to the world. He would never forget that day. It was a week after Bob had been burned at the church. Bob was a good friend. The bad man had made an entire planet stop loving the Emperor. He was one of the space marines that had stopped loving the Emperor. He was blue and gold and made Gav's head hurt when he spoke. Gav hated him more than anything he'd felt about before. Except how much he liked Bob. The bad man had taken over one of the big churches on the planet. He was killing people to make more water demons. Gav wanted to stop him. He wanted to make the bad man pay for killing Bob. Bob had been such a good friend. Gav would make the bad...
Now you can see why I wanted to tag Bob and Lori. Because, once again, I believe this is an interesting story. But Bob and Lori would of course said that I was wishing death upon Bob. When I had no control over Bob's fate to begin with.
Man pay. A lot of Gav's human friends died to get to the bad man. The bad man had brought his friends with him. His friends killed a lot of Gav's friends. That only made Gav hate the bad man more. His fellow guardsmen slowly made it closer to the big church. Gav wasn't scared of his small tank anymore. He was angry. He would make the bad man pay.
Foolish dullard. You hardly deserve to be considered sentient.
The bad man used big words. His voice made Gav's head hurt. His eyes bled. But he continued to try to run toward the bad man. Gav's tank had been blown up, and a lot of his friends were dead. They'd been good friends, but not as good as Bob. Bob was Gav's best friend. Gav would make the bad man pay. The bad man was as big as Gav. He was standing on top of a big set of stairs, right at the entrance to the church. He made Gav...
Now, to be as big as Bob, that would mean he had to be a Chaos Space Marine.
His human friends die with lightning, and he laughed. Gav hated it when the bad man laughed. He wanted to make the bad man shut up forever. The bad man struck Gav with the lightning. It hurt. It hurt real bad. Gav almost stopped running up the stairs, but then he remembered Bob. Bob wouldn't stop running. Bob would keep going. Gav wanted to be like Bob. Gav wanted to make the bad man pay. Gav would always remember the day he walked with little godlings. The bad men in the blue and gold armor were hard to kill, and they used heresy and magic. That made Gav hate them. Gav heard whispering in his head. They whispered...
Now, they said it was blue and gold armor. That would tell me that the Chaos Space Marine was from a chapter called The Thousand Suns. Now, you have heard that I have a kitty named Magnus. Now, he is named after the Primarchs of that Traitor Legion. Magnus the Red.
How he could have everything he ever wanted. But they had nothing he wanted. They had taken a friend from him. Gav roared at them, and the bad men had died when he shot them. They could not whisper to him. His His mind was too full of the Emperor's love, but they were too hard to kill, and they kept coming back. But the Emperor had sent his children to help him. The Emperor had a lot of children, and they were all very strong. All of the Emperor's children were little godlings. Gav and the tribe fought with them. They were very hairy, and had teeth that were just like Gav's teeth. They had armor just like the bad men, but it was grey and blue. Gav wished he could wear armor like that. When the war was over, the godlings in the grey armor gave gifts to the tribe. They said the Emperor loved them very much. Then they sang songs for the dead.
Evolution has left you behind, scum. It's a pity.
Now, the gray and blue armor, that was likely the arch enemy of the Thousand Sons. And their legion is called the Space Wolves. And basically, if you thought, what would a Viking barbarian look like if he was a futuristic space marine, then you have the complete concept of the Space Wolves. Now, a Space Wolf will have fangs, and he will have yellow eyes.
Too unintelligent to understand just how foolish you are.
The bad man wouldn't stop talking. Gav swung his big fists at him, but the bad man was fast. Faster than Gav thought he should be. Gav was getting tired, trying to hit him. The bad man hit him with his big staff. Gav went flying into a statue of the Emperor, shattering it. He felt bad. He wanted to apologize to the Emperor for breaking his statue, but he couldn't catch his breath. His entire body hurt. He'd never hurt so bad in his life. The bad man was kneeling beside him. He grabbed his neck and squeezed.
I pity you, poor creature. For this, you shall get the kindness of a quick death.
Gav lifted himself up suddenly and headbutted the bad man.
You killed Bob!
He shouted. He grabbed the bad man by the throat and lifted him up, driving his fist into the bad man's stomach.
You killed Bob!
The bad man shot lightning at him, but Gav hardly felt it. He was angry. Bob was a good friend, and the bad man's demons had killed him. Gav would make the bad man pay. The bad man kicked and punched at Gav, but Gav wouldn't let go. His arms hurt from holding the bad man up.
You killed Bob!
He tossed the bad man onto his stomach and jumped on top of him, grabbing his strange helmet and slamming his head down into the concrete. Again, and again, and again.
You killed Bob!
Slam.
You killed Bob!
Slam.
You killed Bob!
Slam.
No, please, no.
Gav was
Stop.
crying now. Bob had been a good friend.
You killed Bob!
Slam. The bad man wasn't moving now.
You killed Bob!
Slam. The bad man's helmet was leaking this strange powder.
You killed Bob!
Slam. 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 He was still slamming the empty armor into the ground when the Emperor's grey children came. His skin was burned and blackened. His eyes were bleeding as he cried, and every bone in his hands were broken. But he'd made the bad man pay.
And that was part one of Gav and Bob. Now we'll talk about that a little bit. Now, once again, I hope you enjoyed it. And there are more parts, and this is a reoccurring series. Now you can see how big Fulgrim is compared to Loki. And you see how much bigger he is compared to Richella, or Fulgrim is, and now you can see how much bigger Loki is compared to this little kitty. Loki's my big boy. Him's sweetie. Him's kind of like Gav and Bob. I mean, he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. Yeah, honey, him would like to peel taters. Well, it is Gingy. And like I said, that's why I thought, this is actually quality, and it's got some good writing, and you feel for Gav. I mean, he's got a childlike mind and he's put in a horrible situation, and all he wants is friends and to make all his friends happy with him. Now, apparently, like I said, I listened to most of part 2, and that's when I decided I didn't want to listen to any more because I wanted to do it as a audio commentary and it be a fresh reaction. But, now Bob is a reoccurring theme in this story. Bob is not forgotten, put it that way. It became evident to, in part 2, that the memory of Bob lived on. And that was another reason why I wanted to tag Bob and Lori. Because, once again, rather than just enjoy the story, Bob and Lori would have to make out that there was some sort of insidious thing that I was getting involved with. Now, since that has... Apparently I got some hate comments. We'll worry about it later. It pulled down my station. But since that was kind of short, we will go ahead and do part 2 today. Now, they do have some more series. It's just, I really thought that this one was the most touching and human one. So now we're going to play Gav Bob Part 2. Now, of course, Bob is dead. So, Bob will be living on in the rest of the Gav and Bob series in memory.
Let me see if I have this straight, the Commissar said, pulling his oculars off and rubbing the bridge of his nose. You want to buy an Emperor's Day present from one of the local vendors? Gav nodded enthusiastically. He liked this new Commissar. This Commissar was old and wise. Gav never learned his name. He couldn't remember much, and what he could remember about Commissars was all about Ari. 10 years. It had been 10 years since Ari and Bob had died. If Gav had been
So yes, this was a decade after our last story. I knew there had been some time, but I couldn't remember. So yes, this was 10 years in between the two stories. Now, what I'm probably going to do, Ronnie, is because I was hoping for more people to have came over from the main channel, I'll probably force people on the main channel to listen to this if they like it or not. If we have to hold them down on the internet and make them. Just saying. So like I said, I'll probably play, since, we only have, according to my thing here, 10 in chat. Like I said, I, as an act of spite, will probably force everyone else to listen to it.
normal human, he would have been thrown by how quickly such a time had passed. As an Ogren, he simply accepted it with the same...
Well, actually, Shannon, I run a network of channels. This is purely entertainment. This is a hobby space. We play role-playing games. We tell stories. Now, I am finding places that I can do audio commentary on stories. Now, tomorrow, this started last week. Every Thursday, I am going to link an audio book on the community tab on this channel. And it will be basically a fantasy novel. And it'll be basically free audiobooks. And like I said, that's tomorrow. And I got Kitty in my lap. Where did I move that to? Oh, well, I guess I put it up. But I also, today on the tab, I put up a poll, and I have a Lord of the Rings Trivial Pursuit game. And I'm going to do and it's got 300 question cards in it. So I thought I could take 30 cards for a live stream, and then I could do 10 live streams for over a 10-month period of doing Lord of the Rings trivia. So that's another thing we're going to do. This channel is not specifically for drama, but we may talk about the things of our day. If that makes any sense. And then Grimgoth is purely comedy. Now, Verily Veronica is comedy and drama.
Such a time had passed. As an Ogrin, he simply accepted it with the same simple, childlike worldview with which he accepted everything.
Well, hello, Rachel.
This would be
Well,
pleasant for that.
Now, people love drama. Let me be honest. And nobody's on right now. It's just people are doing their own thing, and people are finding their drama, and I've got kiddies that went in here, and they're just going to have to live with it. No, I'm not opening the door for you to come in here and cause trouble. No. Nuh-uh. I'm trying to figure out which one it is. I kind of think it's Taylor Autumn, but I kind of thought that she was behind the chair that you're sitting on. But she could have slipped out.
As I see you hanging around with every now and again, would it, Sergeant Gav? The Commissar smirked a bit, his voice barely containing the amusement he felt. Gav shuffled his big booted feet.
Yes, sir.
He nervously gripped the edge of the Commissar's large desk, crimping the smooth metal. The Commissar didn't yell at him. He was a nice Commissar. Not airy, but nice. The Commissar sighed and leaned forward. You know, I could have you punished for asking something like this. I could construe it as insubordination. I could be angry, Gav. The Commissar always had to make things simpler for Gav. Ari never had to do that. He had always talked simple. The Commissar hadn't been angry, and had even decided to accompany Gav on his trip to the town. It was a great day, and Gav was happy. The planet they were on was near a lot of other planets taken by the Chaos Men. Gav was happy to have another chance to hurt the Chaos Men. They were the men who killed Bob. He'd killed that blue and gold godling, but he knew that there were more. Thanks to the metal parts in his head, he knew what that meant now. The planet was a great place. It was a place people went to have a good time. The town was all lit up for Emperor's Day, and the lights made Gav happy. He and the Commissar walked along the main street, weapons held at ease before them. The Commissar had told Gav that there might be Chaos Men on this planet, so they had to be prepared. Gav didn't mind. He liked his big gun. Having it around reminded him of the big guns Bob used to use. And besides, if there were Chaos Men around, Gav wanted to hurt them good before they could hurt him. Would you get that filthy thing out of my shop? He's frightening away all the business and breaking everything. The shop owner was mean. Gav didn't want to break things, but the shop was just so tiny. Every time he moved, his elbow or the tip of his gun would touch something and send it clattering to the ground. The shop was full of statues. Little ones, big ones, some even bigger than Gav. Statues of the Emperor, of the Emperor's godlings, of his fellow guardsmen. There were even a few statues of Ogrin. Gav turned when he heard the shop owner begin to yell again. The Commissar was standing by the shop owner's counter, leaning against it. He smiled and nodded as the man continued to berate his big friend, before reaching down and unholstering his las pistol. He set the gun on the counter with a small clatter, never saying a word. Gav was glad the shop owner stopped talking. He was mean.
You remember in earlier episodes, I said that a commissar can basically shoot whoever he wants. So, once again, the commissar laid his gun down on the table and he looked at the shop owner.
It took me a few minutes to find the right one. The simple-minded abhuman didn't know why, but the small statuette seemed much more beautiful than the rest.
How much for this one?
He gingerly picked up the tiny statue, turning and knocking over 3 more on his way to the counter. The shop owner harumphed and looked down at the little statue. 20 throw. You'll take 5. The commissar set the large, gleaming gold coins on the counter and picked up his las pistol. Come now, Sergeant Gav. We have to wrap that thing before you give it to her. Now see here, you... The shop owner began, blanching when he found himself staring down the barrel of that standard-issue Cadian pattern las pistol. My friend Gav is very set on giving this to a special someone. Think of this as an Emperor's Day sale. The commissar smiled and holstered his pistol. Gav liked the commissar. He was a nice man. Not like Ari, but nice.
Now, I think I like that commissar.
They were barely out of the shop when the explosion started. Gav turned his large, bold head towards the center of town, his one fleshy eye going wide. A large corona was spreading up and up into the sky, turning the post-dusk sky into early dawn. He winced and held up a large, meaty hand as the flash became blinding, sending everything into stark relief. The commissar was yelling into nothing, a hand on his ear. Gav looked down at the little statue, before opening one of the pouches on his belt and slipping it inside. He patted the leather pouch before readying his gun. Follow me, Gav! We'll meet up with your fellow tribesmen, 2 kilometers to the east. Gav nodded, acting as if he understood what the commissar was saying, before taking off after the man, big booted feet stomping on the rockcrete below him. The lights of the city flickered and then went dark, making what was once a joyous city dark and scary to Gav. But he was with the commissar, so that was all right. The commissar would know what to do. Gav was panting by the time they ran up to the frantic guard column heading into the center of the city. Groups of PDF, hastily drawn conscripts and grizzled veterans ran about the towering Ogrin in a frenzy. Orders were barked, weapons were ready, and oaths were reaffirmed. Somewhere, in the distance, another explosion ripped through the town. Gav found his tribesmen milling about near the entrance to a chimera. Kelt, a small man even by human standards.
Now, a chimera is an open transport vehicle that tends to have a large weapon mounted on it.
Stood at the top of the mud-caked ramp with a bucket full of potatoes, calling to the shuffling Ogrin. Come on! We got a ton more in here! Get in! Gav came up behind his 3, 4, 5 tribesmates and prodded one in the back.
You heard, Celt? Get in! We got Chaos Men to smash! First one to smash a Chaos Man gets a lot of potatoes!
His tribesmen grinned and whooped and hollered, clambering up on ramp and unknowingly dragging a rather unwilling Celt into the chimera with them. Gav didn't fear the dark, enclosed space like he used to. Maybe it was the metal bits in his head. Gav thought it might be because he knew he was going to kill Chaos Men today. His anger was bigger than his fear today. The noise outside was getting louder and louder. Gav could make out men yelling, las guns firing, and some sort of singing. Well, it didn't really sound like singing, but it was the only word the hulking Ogrin could give to the strange, trilling sound that grew inside the... Suddenly, the chimera lurched around, pulling a quick 180-degree turn. It kicked up a billowing cloud of dust and debris as its tracks worked to keep the squat metal box turning. The lights began to flash as his squad readied their guns.
For the Emperor! Charge! Smash the little ones!
Booted feet stomped down the hatch, followed swiftly by the more light tone of Kelt's boots. Gav swiftly assessed the situation. The Chaos Men were over there, right in front of him. He pointed at them and yelled,
There they are! Smash 'em! Smash 'em for Bob!
None of his tribesmen now remembered Bob. They were all replacements for other losses they'd had in the 10 years since Bob's death. Gav still used that line every time they charged. It felt right.
Yes, every time they decided or they had to go into battle, he always yelled, "For Bob!" So remember, if Bob Cole passes, when we go into battle, we must shout, "For Bob!"
The Chaos Men were hiding behind broken cars and overturned boxes. They dressed funny.
Well, there is another channel that does similar to this. Not as good, but it's a much larger channel, and they have a much larger library.
In a bunch of flashy colors and dresses. As he came closer to the line of Chaos Men, he realized that the singing was coming from them. They were laughing and giggling even as they were shot down, writhing in their own pools of blood as if they were having fun. Gav hit the line of Chaos Men like an oncoming train, barreling through them and sending the bad men flying. He'd forgotten to even fire his gun. He realized as he splattered a woman's head with the butt of that gigantic weapon. Oh well, maybe he'd get to fire it next time. The melee continued unabated. The bad Chaos Men rushing at Gav and his tribesmen, eager to get blown to bits by close-quarter blasts, or smashed apart by the slab-like muscles of the Ogrin. Gav was slick with blood and other bodily fluids, his gun empty from how many of the bad men he'd shot.
Now, he was making a joke there, because they're fighting Chaos Worshippers, and these are of the pleasure god Slaanesh. And let's just say, many of the Slaanesh worshippers are very Melton-like. So, when he said talking about blood and other things, I mean, we don't even want to think about what those other things were.
He killed with enjoyment, knowing that he was doing the work of the Emperor as he clubbed a young boy to death. Or was it a girl? It was hard to tell with normal humans, much less these Chaos.
See, he just killed a shim. Yes, on this channel, we have our first shim kill.
Gav grunted as he felt bullets slap into his back muscle, digging in slightly before that tightly corded musculature and hard bone stopped it from hitting anything vital. He turned and found himself staring down a great hulking Chaos Man holding a heavy stubber. The man was almost completely naked, and Gav found himself laughing as he saw the man had a great big breast on the right side of his chest.
Experience the kiss of death, blunted thing.
The bad Chaos Man spat, pulling down on the trigger. He fired 3 shots, 2 missed, and 1 ricocheted off his forehead before he screamed out in surprised ecstasy. From shoulder to hip bone, a great chainsword cut through the Chaos Man, sending a great spray of arterial blood in almost every direction. The 2 halves separated and flopped to the ground, leaving Gav smiling as he straightened up.
Now, for those that weren't here for our last one, a chainsword is like a sword, but it's a giant chainsaw.
There, heaving her monstrous chainsword onto her shoulder, was Tala, her blood-stained parchment clothing wafting in the breeze. Hello, Gav.
Doing the Emperor proud, I see.
She smiled. Gav smiled too. It was going to be a good day. Fighting alongside Tala was a lesson in humility for Gav. She almost scared him.
In the name of the Holy Father,
she'd yell, as she and her squad of similarly clothed sisters charged through torrents of lasfire. Gav and his tribes.
Now you see, in the 40th millennium, as I mentioned, the Emperor is worshipped as a god. Well, this religion has a version of nuns. But if you crossed the Inquisition with nuns in Rambo, you kind of got the idea of what these creatures are. They're called the Adeptus Sororitas, or Soritas, depending on how you wish to pronounce it. and they are the daughters of the emperor, and they are rabid, bloodthirsty fanatics, and these women kill for the emperor.
And following in their wake, watching her sisters torn apart by heavy bolter fire, or instantly
Well, Gingy, this is a nun with a giant chainsaw.
incinerated by las cannons didn't seem to matter to Tala. If anything, she just ran harder, holding that large chainsword over her head and whooping like she was a demon herself. The Chaos Men were fighting to protect some sort of ritual in the center of town. Gav had heard some of the men yelling about it as they continued their frantic race towards the center of the city. Gav knew that whatever they were planning, it was definitely nothing good. 2 of his tribesmen had died, one with a hole punched through him by a las cannon, the other swallowed up by scores of gibbering, giggling Chaos Men. Tala's squad was doing even worse. Half of her original 20 members cut down before they'd reached the edge of ground zero. Gav had never seen such destruction before. It seemed as if everything in the center of town had simply ceased to be, replaced with scorched and blackened earth. The Chaos Men formed a tight ring around the center, fighting like the madmen they were to keep the guard from derailing their plans. The fighting began to bog down when the guardsmen smashed against the ring of those Chaos Men. Gav could see men and women in the uniform of the local police among the Chaos Men, as well as the PDF. Gav didn't really know what that meant. He didn't think the Commissar would tell him even if he'd asked. A Lehman Russ tank barked its commanding feet from Gav, deafening him momentarily as it spat death towards the men who'd stopped loving the Emperor. Gav raised his empty gun and yelled out as he saw a score of Chaos Men shredded by the gigantic impact, only to grimace as the gap was quickly plugged. Gav! He turned his head towards that feminine voice, seeing Tala stand on the ruined, smouldering chassis of a chimera. He waved. I see more of your tribesmen to the west. Let's join them for a final charge. By the Emperor! It is a good day to die. She raised her chainsword and ululated at the Chaos Men before hopping off the chassis and disappearing into the smog-choked night.
Now, the world of Warhammer 40k. Now, they have Space Marines, and all the Space Marines are male. Now, as a counterpart, they have these girls, the Adeptus Sororitas. So, they're not Space Marines, but they're kind of like the female opposite of Space Marines. They're similarly equipped as the Space Marines.
Gav took off after her, wondering what she was so happy about. Tala hadn't been joking when she said that she'd seen more of his tribesmen. If Gav could count that high, he'd have been able to count himself among 30 of his own tribe, as well as 10 Sisters Repentia and 20 Sororitas. This is where we shall make the breach! A tall, scar-ridden woman in a suit of golden armor yelled at the gathered flock, raising her crackling power sword high. Repentia! Ogrin! Lead the charge and force a gap! We shall follow you into the breach! Gav was one of only 2 boneheads left among the Ogrin Auxilia, so he and his counterpart, a happy-go-lucky sod named Jim, split the rest of his tribesmen into what amounted to 2 equal squads, give or take a couple confused in-betweeners. Tala and her fellow Repentia sent up a great cry. Gav and his fellow Ogrin raised their guns into the air and fired. Well, except Gav, though he yelled really loud, stomping towards the tightly packed line with Tala's screaming, whooping sisters in tow. The armored sisters hung back, moving forward slowly, a few shooting grenades.
Now, I did miss this before, but he used the word Repentia. So this means that this important person, Tala, she is basically have what considered a punishment squad. Because these nuns are so fanatical that if they dishonor themselves anyway, they join a Repentia squad, which is basically what we would like consider the Suicide Squad out of DC.
Over the gaggle of berserkers and into the line of Chaos men. Gav and Tala ran side by side, the Ogryn's loping, flat-footed gait matching Tala's swift, agile grace. She revved her chainsword and whooped, grinning ferally, her aquamarine eyes burning with purpose. The charge was only halfway through, when a great boom sounded throughout the battlefield. Another explosion sounded from the center of town, though there was no bright flash accompanying. Then the entire Chaos line fell down dead. Grins of insane ecstasy locked on their rictus frozen faces. The stink of burning flesh made Gav cough, slapping a paw-like hand over his nose. Hunters had taken immediate action, burning the bodies of the fallen Chaos men in the tense silence following their sudden deaths. Nobody ventured past the circle of dead heretics, guards and sororitas alike frozen in confusion. Only the woman in the golden armor seemed to know what was going on, barking at the general and his friends to make ready a defense and secure the perimeter. What that meant to Gav was walking back away from what had looked like a fun scrap, that gun held over his shoulder and a look of confusion and mild fear crossing his face.
Take heart, Gav.
The Ogryn turned and smiled as Tala appeared beside him, chainsword held over her shoulder in a similar fashion.
The fight is not yet done. The enemy is up to something behind those flames. I can feel it.
She still had that scary smile upon her face, despite bleeding from several...
Now, a typical Adeptus Sororitas, I mean, they're fanatics beyond your belief. I mean, totally. I mean, there is not a religious fanatic on this planet that is more fanatic than these women.
Places across her scarred form.
You alright, sister?
Gav spoke, leaning against the same Chimera chassis she'd launched from minutes before. He pulled his water canteen from his belt and popped the top, swigging the warm liquid with great wet gulps before wiping his mouth with his arm.
Pain is weakness being purged from the body.
She spoke, before her features softened somewhat.
I'm fine, Gav.
She smiled, and took the water bottle when he offered it, finding the liquid remarkably refreshing. She'd hardly known she'd been thirsty until the water had hit her lips, and now she almost drained the large canteen. Licking her lips, she handed it back. A moment of silence passed between them. Abhuman and fallen battle sister standing across from each other. Tala's mind was reeling, thinking of the possibilities of what was going on behind that curtain of fire. Gav was trying to remember something. He had something to tell Tala. No.
Well, that's one of the things about this universe. It's vast enough that everyone will find something that they really like. Now, typically, guys will find a Space Marine chapter or something to like, but there is all sorts of things to like. Now, many Inquisitor stories, they can end up like a detective story.
Something to give her. What was it?
This is one fine Emperor's day,
Tala commented, staring off into the roiling smoke rising from the burning cadavers.
No, it's not.
Gav responded, sarcasm failing to translate for him.
We got attacked, and...
His fleshy eye widened for the second time that day, as he clumsily reached for that pouch.
I got you something for Emperor's Day, sis.
Gav had to clamp his hands over his ears, bending over double. A shrill call struck across the battlefield, wavering and ululating in ways that made men soil their undershorts accidentally. Gav stumbled and almost knocked Tala down, the Repentia also covering her ears and hissing as blood seeped from her nose. They come! Contact! All over us! Emperor, help us! Gav looked up to see figures leaping over the bodies of the dead Chaos Men. Skinny demons, hundreds of them, thousands of them. They danced and hopped towards the panicking guardsman line. Some rode two-legged things, with long noses and even longer tongues. Others rode chariots or even flew with wings.
Now you can see how big Loki is compared to little Summer. You know, Summer's little baby, and you could hardly see me for Loki.
Gav furrowed his brow and hefted his gun, suddenly remembering that he had an extra clip of ammo clamped around his arse. Grabbing it and slamming it into place. He turned to Tala.
It's a good day to die, right?
He fired off a round towards one of those skinny demons. The spreading cone of shrapnel shredding the leering, lecherous thing. It vaporized, as if it had never existed. A whispered sigh following in its wake.
In the name of the Father, die! Die! Die!
Tala swung her chainsword at one of the skinny demons who just twirled out of range, giggling and smiling. The demon clicked its massive claws and danced forward, meaning to take Tala's head off. The Repentia was fast, raising the whirring teeth of her weapon to take off the hissing creature's claw with one deft stroke. Gav held one of the creatures by its neck, grinning as it clawed fruitlessly at his slab-muscled arm. Raising his arm up, he slammed the thin, delicate thing against the ground again and again and again, until slick, blue-black ichor covered the front of his uniform, hissing and steaming the cool of the night air.
It's a good day.
He mused, as he backhanded a mounted trilling demon, sending the silly thing flying over the burnt-out Chimera chassis. He didn't notice the several cuts across his body that the skinny demons had been making. He did start to feel a mite dizzy. Though it certainly wasn't from blood loss, his skin felt a bit too hot. And for some reason, the colors in the world seemed too hot. He winced as he felt a claw dig deep into his back, turning round to get at the demon but grabbing onto thin air as it danced away, giggling at him. He hated that laughter. It reminded him of...
Smash him!
He reached down and grabbed a big chunk of rockcrete that had once been part of a building. Hefting it above his head, he hurled it into a mob of the demons, crushing a good 5 or 6 of the tittering, hateful things.
For Bob!
He added, as he picked up another slab and hurled it, getting only one as the dexterous mob...
So do you think I ought to start making that mad battle cry, "For Bob"?
Flitted away.
Settle down, blunted one.
Gav reeled as that voice hit him, stumbling back to see something taller than him moving out from the smoke. It was thin and lithe, taller than the two-legged machine some of his guardsmen friends drove. 2 pairs of thin arms moved with unnatural grace around a chest festooned with swollen, pierced udders. Its androgynous, horned face grinned down at the 2 beings, long tongue sliding out to taste the air.
Step back, handmaidens.
The tall thing lifted a finely crafted broadsword as big as Gav, twirling it around with practiced ease as the smaller demons flitted away to seek new victims.
I wish to see how hard this thing will fight in the name of Bob.
He shan't be fighting alone, foul thing!
Lynn beside Gav,
Hello,
revving
Falcon.
her gigantic chainsword. She was bleeding even worse than before, her parchment sprinkling little droplets of her precious life fluid across the blasted hellscape with every lazy wave in the soft breeze. The laughter of the
Magnus?
Keeper of Secrets made Gav wince and Tala growl.
Magnus.
How cute!
Gav was amazed at how fast such a big thing could be. He'd seen the Emperor's godlings move fast, and had thought he'd seen the fastest things in them. But this gigantic creature put them all to shame. Claws and sword came down towards Gav and Tala. Had it been a one-on-one fight, Gav would have been shredded within seconds. But having to split its attentions between two foes meant that Gav only had to block half a flurry of strikes, most of which glanced off his strong skeleton when they pierced his flesh. He began to grow confident, raising up his gun to blast away at the tall, spiteful creature, whooping and hollering as he went. He wouldn't have noticed his arm missing had it not been for his gun. It had stopped firing, so he looked down to
Oh man, Gav lost his arm. That's important.
find that the entirety of his arm from below the shoulder had been ripped off. Neat, as if it had been sheared off with a cutting laser. Gav fell onto his arse, and looked down at his bleeding stump of an arm. As an Ogrin, his physiology was markedly different from humans. Harsher gravity on his homeworld meant that his veins were more contracted than normal, meaning he could suffer loss of a limb without the immediate threat of bleeding out. Shock, however, was still a threat. In that state, Gav forgot the melee and began to search for his missing arm.
Enough!
The Keeper of Secrets threw aside the Repentia's feeble efforts, the blood loss finally slowing Tala's reflexes. With one great cry, she threw herself at that thing which had dared to hurt Gav, tears rolling down her face. Gav, who had been nothing but kind to her. The cursed thing's tail whipped about, disarming Tala before impaling the Repentia upon its barbed tip with ease, the Keeper's grin growing all the wider. It could taste the woman's despair as she realized her death was imminent, tossing her aside to turn on the Ogrin.
Your little friend is dead, Blunted One. Well, close enough.
Well, that's sad about Tala. Hopefully she isn't dead, but it sounds like poor old Tala's dead. Now, before that, I was thinking about playing this on Valentine's Day because Gav is so loving, but seems that everybody that Gav loves dies.
It went to one knee, leaning down to put its face level with the Ogrin's. Ugly, vile thing. Killing it would be a kindness.
I'll take my time with you. You deserve a modicum of experience. Such a blunted thing is bound to have had so little.
That jaw hung open in a feral grin, tongue sliding out. Ogrins rarely move quickly or have good ideas. If they have one, they usually don't have it while having another. Sometimes, though, in the great galaxy, an Ogrin might have a moment of clarity. Grabbing one of his grenades from his belt, he popped the simple trigger mechanism off and shoved the weapon into the gloating thing's hateful, toothy mouth. The Keeper of Secrets, Akvathlasta, had only seconds left in the Empyrean to realize its error in judgment, before its head exploded in a shower of gore.
There you go. Now, there are 4 Chaos Gods, and one of them is named Zinch, and one of his powerful demons is a type of demon called the Keeper of Secrets, and Gav just killed one.
Gav! Where was that voice coming from? Gav stood above the broken and twitching body of the Keeper of Secrets, his arm momentarily forgotten as he heard the feeble voice calling to him. Tala! He remembered. A vague image of that horrible thing impaling the Repentia on its tail flashed through the Ogrin's head. He looked down at the hissing, dissembling corpse, fighting back the urge to punch it. Gav! Gav's booted feet grew louder in Tala's hearing. Her sight was all but gone, the blood loss and trauma rendering her blind. She felt big, sweaty hands taking hold of her body, lifting her into a sitting position and almost crushing her into a sweating, stinking chest. She closed her eyes and lay her head on that chest.
Tala! Tala, don't go to sleep. Don't sleep, Tala.
He shook her until her eyes popped open again, tears rolling freely down his cheeks.
It's over, Gav. I gave my life for the Father. Now I can die in peace.
Tala smiled and reached up, finding Gav's bumpy, stubble-covered face and caressing gently.
No,
He shook his head.
not now. I haven't even given you your present yet.
He reached down into that pouch and pulled that statuette out, taking one of her hands and slipping the angelic figurine into it. Tala grinned.
Gav, it's beautiful.
She wouldn't tell the Ogren she couldn't see it. It would be too cruel.
Thank you, sister.
Gav's voice had taken on a grave tone. Tala noticed it, and her face became set. She could hear them encircling the two, giggling, trilling. Gav was staring down a slowly tightening circle of demonettes. They watched and waited, drinking in the last dying feelings of the sister Repentia. Despair was a foreign feeling to an Ogren. They usually died too quick to feel anything except quiet disappointment that they could no longer serve the Emperor. As the circle began to close, Gav began to feel the tendrils of despair choking his heart. Everyone he loved died. Ari first, then Bob, and now Tala. One of the few humans who'd ever treated him really good. Not just decent, but really good. With nothing left to do, the Ogren bowed his head in prayer.
Emperor, if you can hear me, I don't care if I live. I done good. But Tala, forgive her for whatever she done.
The words came slow, blood loss and his own ignorance fighting against the feelings that wanted to be voiced.
Save her. In the Emperor's name.
The demonette cackled and moved in closer. Gav curled himself around Tala's motionless corpse, unwilling to stop protecting her, even in the face of death. A bright, white beam of light pierced between Gav and Tala. The demon...
Now, it was time for me to pause for commentary. Now, you saw Loki that was in my lap earlier? His father was the original Elric. Ow. Oh. Now, this is Elric II. In the original, Elric is his great-great-grandfather. So Loki is actually Elric's great-uncle. So you show the big orange kitty? He is the great-uncle of this kitty.
As hissed and hopped back, their flesh burning and popping and peeling. Gav was launched back by a shockwave that was heard across the battlefield, banging against that burnt-out Chimera chassis and sliding down onto his arse.
Follow me, my sisters! The grenade has disorientated them!
Bolts ripped through the bodies of the shrieking demonettes, the buzzing of eviscerators cutting through the horrible creatures. Sororitas marched in calm lines, bolters held at their chests, firing on full auto into the screaming melee. Repentia and Demonette were taken down with impunity, the area scoured of demonic taint within short order. Gav saw none of this, of course. The blast from the blessed grenade had knocked him against the burnt-out Chimera chassis, the blunt trauma, combined with blood loss finally knocking him unconscious. Tala had received minimal damage from the grenade, thanks in part to Gav's protective nature. His body had shielded her from the worst of the holy blast, though what little she did receive only exacerbated her condition. Gav awoke in a Medicaid facility days later. He would need extensive grafts, a bionic arm, and perhaps even debriefing by the Inquisition about what he had been witness to. Gav didn't care about any of that. His first question, when he could croak it out, was,
Is Tala okay?
It was the only way to be sure, Gav. She'd already been tainted once. Prolonged exposure to the Slaneshi demons might have.
The Sororitas didn't get the rest of it out. A bedpan flew at her, crumpling into the wall right where her head had been. Despair had once again taken hold of Gav's heart. They said it was standard procedure for one twice cursed as Tala. She would have turned back eventually. At least this way she would be useful, they said. Gav's anger was tempered only by his inability to move. They doped him up something fierce, a compromise between the general and the canoness. The canoness would rather not told the abhuman. Simply let him assume that Tala died. The general said that the least Gav deserved was the truth, so they doped him so he wouldn't be able to hurt anyone. They hoped. Gav was crying again, his one arm flailing as the emotions fought to come forth. He'd hardly understood a thing the Sororitas had said, but the gist of it was clear. Tala was alive, but... He felt a gentle hand press against his shoulder. He calmed down almost immediately, looking up into the one aquamarine eye Tala had left. She'd been mind-scrubbed and turned into a servitor. It was said that small parts of her still remained in her living brain. But to Gav, this was somehow worse than just letting her die.
Now,
The entire left half.
now you see, in this universe, humanity was almost destroyed by artificial intelligence. So, to replace what we would consider to be normally artificial intelligent machines in a futuristic society, they actually use lobotomized human beings as cyborgs. And so basically what happened is Tala died and they repurposed her body.
Her face had been replaced with metal bits, a mesh grill in place of where her mouth had been. That one aquamarine eye stared down at bovine complacency. That single good, human, fleshy hand gently stroking at Gav's shoulder. The rest of her body had been left to rot, replaced with a humanoid chassis built to be the greeter of some hospice somewhere, eternally signing people in and making recorded, polite conversation. Gav let that one human hand continue to stroke his shoulder. Maybe it was just a metal brain working, trying to calm him down. Gav liked to think some part of Tala was still in there. Tala had been a great friend, just like Bob. 2 days later, a Lehman Russ tank crushed the statuette left out on the battlefield, and nobody noticed.
With Homebake, you can mix and match your family's favorite main, side,
And that was the end of part 2. Now, I didn't hear the end of part 2 before, but so far, part 1 was a tearjerker, and I had no idea that part 2 was going to turn into a tearjerker also. But yes, and now that was the first 2 parts of Gav and Bob. Now, in another program, we'll have parts 3 and 4, and this apparently is going to be an ongoing series. Because part 4 is recent. They've uploaded that, I forgot when, but I had already slated to start doing this in the future when they made the part 4. So yes, you know, I feel sorry for Gav, and Bob's no longer with us. Now, the first time I thought is, I was making a joke, about Bob and Lori. That was kind of my joke, personal joke when I started listening to this the first time. Instead of Gav and Bob, in my head it was Bob and Lori. Now, like I say, Bob is no longer with us. But yeah, I feel for Gav. Now, we hope that in part 3 and 4 that maybe his life will take an upswing. I hope. Just saying. But yes, apparently in part 1 and 2, Bob has lost everyone again. Gav has lost everyone again. I just keep thinking Bob's dead. Freudian slip. Now, the people on the other channel, I expected at least 20 people to come over here, but since they didn't, I am going to make them listen to this, if they like it or not. Yes, I am. In fact, I'll probably, when I finally decide to do this, I'll talk like 5 minutes of drama. I will tease them, and then I'll make them listen to the entire thing, and then I'll talk drama. And that'll learn them. But you know, as you can see, this is a quality story. I mean, I really like this story. And I really feel for Gav. And this is an original story. Let me check this. What I hate about this thing is it always pulls down whatever I'm done or doing. Even if I was on it. So then it makes me have to go all the way through the interface again to get back where I was. Now I'm surprised. Now Gavin Bob, it's got 136,000 views. I'm surprised. Now part 2 has 63,000 views. Part 3 has 46,000. And the last part, part 4, it has 48,000. Okay, and part 4 was uploaded a month ago. So, you know, it might be some time before there's a part 5, but we still have a part 3 and a part 4 to go through on another day. And like I said, I had a higher expectation for attendance, so I really do appreciate everyone that came. And because they did make small attendance, I am going to subject this to them as on the other channel if they like it or not. Just saying. Well, this is going to be the content here. You know, mainly, we are going to do fun things, and this is an entertainment-based program. It's just because we're all friends and we have similar channels we watch. You know, I might make an occasional joke in a drama reference. But I'm going to get off here now because I'm making these for replay value. So, you know, that way later on, when I say, if you want to learn about this, watch this. Now, once again, when they make this stuff into a regular series, now you know what an Ogryn is. And some of you now have learned what a Commissar is. And you've learned about the space nuns, the Adeptus Sororitas. And like I said there, if you cross Rambo with a religious fanatic and a nun, you kind of understand what they are. And they're heavily armed as the Space Marines are. And they come in their own orders. Like I said, there's something in Warhammer 40k that everyone will really like. Everyone's not going to like everything in Warhammer 40k, but everyone will find something that they do like. Now, I'm going to get off here, and hopefully I'll see you in someone else's chat in a little bit. And everyone, thank you for coming, and have a good night.